was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking to a man I am proud to call my friend, David Thibodeau. David Thibodeau is a survivor of the Waco siege in 1993, and with the anniversary on April 19th, I thought it was only appropriate to have him on the show to talk about his thoughts on Waco and a little bit about what's going on today. But first, as always, for all your graphic design needs, go to ryanbunting.com. Ryan Bunting is the gentleman who designed mine and Pete Quinones podcast logos. Ryan Bunting is a great graphic designer, a great libertarian, and he will work with you on whatever you want to see done at ryanbunting.com. As always, thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. All right, here with David Thibodeau. How are you doing, sir?
Good, man. Very good tonight.
That's good, man.
Energized.
You got to drink that monster before you jump on.
Exactly what I did, dude. There's the purple one. They taste the best. Sugar-free, of course.
I've never had one of those. I've had the blue one and the green one. Try not to drink too many of them, though. They make me jittery.
Yeah. I had to go out and do some errands today, and it's just like, I wear out, so I'll take one then. Yeah. Feel good now.
Well, that's good. So, if anybody doesn't know, David Thibodeau is a survivor of the Waco siege in 1993. And I thought I would have him on. And what a perfect time to have you on, because I just saw Vice News released a short, probably 18-minute episode. It was an interview that they did with Bryce Sage, one of the...
Byron Sage.
Is it Byron?
This is Byron Sage. I am your FBI negotiator. I will be here throughout the endeavor, and we wish that you would just come out with your hands up, and we can move this into the courts. Byron said, "Yeah, that's Byron."
Yeah, he managed to choke out some tears and all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, he's saying the same stuff he's been saying for years, and I really wonder about the guy. There's a couple things. Well, he and his friend Cliff Van Zandt have called me a liar on national television before. And I basically said, you're calling me a liar after the 51 days where you guys continuously lied to the American public one day after another about who we were and what was really going on. Really? So, these people call me a liar. It's just, I find it very offensive. The thing with Byron that's interesting is I think Byron is, I think Byron is a true Fed through and through. I mean, this guy is, 100%. I think there's a part of me that think he really believes everything he's saying. And I think you can't call Mount Carmel a mass suicide without concentrating and thinking about the infrared video that shows shooters from near the tanks shooting into the back of the building.
Right.
The FBI claimed that's sunlight reflection. They claim that did not happen. Well, it's on your infrared tape. You guys had a plane flying above Mount Carmel with an infrared camera. You took that tape. You know damn well it's fully automatic weapons fire. It looks the same as if you take fully automatic weapons fire from Somalia or Iraq, anywhere where you have an infrared. When you're showing what full auto looks like, it looks the exact same. That is not sunlight reflections. So again, you're trying to deny your own technology that you used to show that the fires were started at 3 different places, that in turn blaming the people inside for setting the fire.
Right.
And here's, the whole point is this. He always says the same stuff. He says, someone brought a dog out, but they couldn't bring their kids out. And it's a powerful soundbite, but when he's saying that, they don't give a chance for anyone that was inside to rebut that. And the truth is, the building was so destroyed by the veracity of the tank assault. The tanks went all the way in through the building to the concrete structure and put a massive amount of CS gas in where the kids were, a massive amount. To the point where these kids were, many of them were anesthetized. They died of CS gas poisoning. I think they died of the gas before the fire even began from the amount of gas they put in that little room.
Right.
And then why didn't the mothers grab their kids and come out? Well, what are you coming out to? If you're coming out to the back, you're being shot down. So, point one, you can't call it a mass suicide if you're shooting people that are trying to escape the building. That's a mass homicide.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a suicide. Now, I believe that some people were trapped in the building and they may have taken their own lives. I'm not denying that happened
Right.
according to the autopsy reports. That what it looks like. But there are other of the bodies that were autopsied that showed people that had bullet wounds in the center of the head and the center of the chest. And that's not how you take your own life. That's how it's more indicative of a homicide than a suicide, is my point.
Right.
So, for him to say, someone brought a dog out, which was Clive Doyle. There was a dog that was staying with the group, and while the place was, the smoke was filling, Clive tried to throw the dog out. The dog kept coming back because it was our dog. The dog loved us. He didn't want to be, he wanted to be with his family.
Mm-hmm.
So Clive finally brought the dog out. Byron is implying that Clive didn't care enough to get his own daughter out.
Right.
But the matter is, you couldn't get down the hall. You couldn't get to the concrete structure from the chapel area. They had cut the building off when the tanks went in and destroyed walls, floors, the stairs that led up into the building, broke windows, made huge holes. I mean, they just did so much damage to the building. Nobody could get to the after 10. Nobody could get to the other side of the building after around 10:30.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Not a fair assessment.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. And I listened to what he said, and none of it, very little of it, if any of it, rings very true. But let's back up a little bit, because I have kind of an interesting tie to the entire Waco story, and not that I knew anybody that was part of the church, but my mom went to high school with one of the ATF agents, actually the first ATF agent that was killed. So, and she's emailed you about that, and y'all have talked about that. I've talked to you in person about this, but it was 93. It was early 93. So I was about 12 years old. We were living in Dallas at the time. I remember watching it on television. It's one of the first major news stories I remember, like, watching on television in real time as it was happening every evening, watching the evening news with my parents. And I remember that the feeling was that the members of the church were evil. And there was very little said about the children from what I remember. But I moved to Waco when I guess I was about 19 when I moved to Waco. And I lived there for about a year. I worked at a company called Time Manufacturing off of Industrial Boulevard. And I talked to some of the guys there about the siege, about Mount Carmel, about the people, specifically about David Koresh, because he was the most well-known person out of the entire siege. So everybody I spoke with said they had met him at one point or another. He was one of the nicest guys in the world that they had ever met, completely polite, and all he ever did was invite them to church. So let's talk a little bit about the leading up to the siege, and let's talk about who David Koresh actually was.
Okay. I mean, David was the guy that claimed that he had a vision. He claimed that he had a mission and that he understood something about the scripture that others didn't, something called the Seven Seals. And apparently most of his life, when he was Vernon Wayne Howell, His given name. He was a seeker. He was seeking. He was always reading the book. If you talk to his stepbrother, Roger says he was always reading the Bible, or Ellen G. White's writing. He was, I guess, initiated in the Seventh-day Adventist Church young, as far as I can tell. And that as he kind of got older, he started to just continue to seek. He would read Ellen G. White's writings and the scripture for himself. Roger said Roger would go to work, and David would be reading at his table. Roger would come back from work, he'd still be at the same spot reading. So it appeared that David, spent a lot of time with the word. Mm. And so he wanted to know, at one point, he was always seeking, like, he told stories that he would always go to graveyards to talk to God and just be like, where are my people that I need to meet? I want to know you. He would always, that was the thing with him. And so, so he's always searching, he was always trying to get God to acknowledge him, I guess. And he asked one of the older women who lived in Mount Carmel, that were at his church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I think in Texas. I think it was Tyler, Texas.
Okay.
Either that or he was living in Dallas. I'd have to brush up a little bit. But basically, she said that, I hear that there is a prophet. He said to this old lady, how come there are no prophets anymore? I would like to know a prophet of God. And she said, I hear there's a prophet in Waco. As soon as he found out, he went to Waco to find her. And of course, that was Lois Roden, Ben Roden's wife, who after Ben died became the prophet of Mount Carmel. Mm-hmm. The Seventh-day Adventist group, or the offshoot, the Branch Davidians, they were an offshoot of the Seventh-day Adventists that lived out there. Many, some for like Perry Jones, the Jones family, all of their lives, really, since the 50s or 60s, they had been out there. They were wondering about, there was a progressive truth at Mount Carmel. In other words, Ben Roden talked to someone that would come. Lois Roden talked to someone who would come. Someone who would be able to reveal the seals, or someone who would be able to have the living truth, or a new light, if you will. And see, every leader at Mount Carmel believed that they were given a light to give to the world. They had a specific message. In Lois's case, she was shown the Holy Spirit feminine, Proverbs 8 and 9. And that, that's something that when you look into the Hebrew, it's really interesting. It's a lot of the Hebrew words, every time the Holy Spirit is mentioned in the Hebrew, it's in the feminine form. Every word in Hebrew is masculine, feminine, or neutral. And so the Holy Spirit is always feminine. You read Proverbs 8 and 9, it sounds like there's a woman, the wisdom of God, speaking to man, saying that she was with God when he created the heavens and the earth, always by his side as one with him. Very interesting scripture. So Lois taught that. And that was a very new way of looking at things for, people with any kind of Christian or, Catholic or Methodist background, or Seventh-day Adventist for that matter. And so, she went around America speaking that truth. And that was the thing. And so when David or Vernon showed up at Mount Carmel, he started to serve Lois, do whatever she wanted around the place, and started to get studies. He ended up marrying Rachel, Perry Jones's daughter, and they went to Israel. When he was in Israel, he claimed that God gave him a vision, and that's when he came back and started teaching the 7 seals. So it was something that, if you talk to the older people that were there, that's what's really fascinating about the whole thing to me. If you talk to some of the older people, they're like, this guy stuttered. He, had an understanding of scripture, but he was certainly no gifted teacher. And until he came back from Israel, all of a sudden he starts teaching. And he starts going into a depth of scripture that the people that were there had been looking for, built off their foundation. But he took it further. He took it light years further. And so those stories from kind of the old people that were around him were really fascinating to me. How we started this discussion, you were talking about the people that you spoke to in Waco. As far as I know, from the people that had met David in Waco, he was very much that. He's just an average, Southern guy. Mm-hmm. He had many friends in town. He went to the bar and had beers with people and that kind of thing. And I know of being around him early, the year that I was there at Mount Carmel Solidly, There were times when he would talk to musicians. One guy said that his bass was stolen. David Koresh went and bought him a bass. I saw him on several occasions do things for people, and nothing expected in return. He always claimed that he had a truth to give, and if people were willing, he would be willing to show it. But he wasn't really pushy with it, but he was confident in his ability, and he was confident in his vision, and he was going to try to teach the Bible to as many people as he possibly could who would listen.
Yeah. And I specifically remember talking to one guy, and I can't for the life of me remember his name. I can see his face. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, I'm almost 42 now, so we're talking over 20 years ago that I had these conversations with these people. But there was this one gentleman that worked with me. He was a painter, and he specifically told me, he's like, he was an extremely nice guy, very charismatic, very sweet guy, easy to get along with, and he would invite me to church, and I would go every once in a while, and it was just a normal, average, Christian, evangelical, like, is the way he came across to a lot of people. And yeah. I don't think people ever get that image. They don't ever see that, because whenever I was told that, I was shocked. I was like, really? He was just a normal guy, because we heard for so long that he was a cult leader, and he was, out of his mind, and he was abusive and controlling and manipulative. And so when you hear about, regular people that met him that weren't involved in the church, that were like, no, he was just a normal guy. He was easy to talk to. He's a really nice guy. It kind of sheds a different light on the entire subject. When were y'all aware? I guess it was whenever David got the call from the gun shop in Hewitt, that y'all are aware that there was some investigation, someone was looking into you.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when that was. I think that was before the guys moved in across the street. But Henry McMahon, who owned the Hewitt handguns, had worked with David. He considered David to be his preacher, actually, and came out on Saturdays and had studies with us and things like that. But Henry was kind of showed David and some of the younger guys who went to the gun shows the ropes, how the business works, if you will. And so they started, buying and selling guns. They had all the yellow sheets on the firearms. Well, when he got raided, Henry called David and said, I got the ATF here. They're raiding me, and they're asking a lot of questions about you. And he said, put them on, Henry. I'll talk to them. They come out, check out any of the yellow sheets they want. And, they chose not to go that route. They didn't want to talk to David. They basically told Henry to hang the phone up. So that, the whole thing, it was so unnecessary. It so could have been avoided. It's just the government out of control. It truly was. Truly is. It truly was. It's just pride and arrogance at its ultimate. And that's, like people say, how do you view Waco spiritually? Spiritually, I view it very, I don't like to get into black and white, because it's so, it's almost too easy. But usually things are in a shade of gray. But my point is, the way the ATF and the FBI especially, they both acted, I shouldn't say especially, the ATF were incredibly arrogant. And then when the FBI took over, the people on the ground, the guys on the ground, were incredibly arrogant as well. And I say that because they would moon us, they would give us the finger, their tanks would run over Peter Gent's grave over and over again. They did it purposely. To me, that's ultimate arrogance. And scripturally, if you break it down, it says that the people that fight against the people of God, or the people that have the message of God, will be proud and arrogant, haughty, very haughty. And the people of God will be more of like, the sheep, if you will, or very humble, more humble. What people would call naive, almost, if you will. And, to a sense, many of the people in Mount Carmel, were naive. They lived in the scripture. They lived in a book that's thousands of years old. And that was the world they lived in every day. Almost a study every night. They kept the daily at at 9 and 3 where you reflect on God, have a little study. So these people, it was 100%. The people in Mount Carmel were 100%. What does the scripture say? We're there. And the FBI chose, when they took over the ATF investigation, after the raid, when they took over, they chose to look at these people as criminals. David Koresh is the chief criminal. And that was unfortunate. That was the wrong way to look at it. They should have looked at these people as Bible believers, at least try to speak their language. They never did. They had resources. See, they knew what they were doing. The FBI had resources. James Tabor, Phil Arnold, they had theologians who wanted to speak David's language. They didn't allow that. If you look at the FBI has a crisis, a book of what to do in a crisis situation, a rule book, if you will. They have violated 11 of their own principles, 11 rules of what not to do in a crisis situation if you want people to come out. So instead of following their own rule book, they violated over 11 different rules during the course of the 51 days. If you want people to come out, why would you do that? Why would you take your own rule book, which I would imagine comes from years of tests, testimonies, and psychological profiles on people? Why would you not use the wisdom that you've put together, right? That's your job. Mm-hmm. So when Byron Sage, wants to say that it was an impossible situation, no, it wasn't. You made it. The FBI made it an impossible situation.
Right.
The ATF made it an impossible situation. It was the whole thing. All you had to do was get David Koresh when he jogged in front of their house, or get David Koresh when he went shooting with them at a firing range, a public firing range 2 miles away from Mount Carmel.
Right.
He and 2 agents went and shot at a firing range. Mm-hmm. That's the guy you're scared of. That's the guy that you claim to Congress and you claim to the Texas Rangers that never came out of his house. They said to Congress, we couldn't get David when he came out of his house because he never left. That's crazy, and that's a blatant lie. And frankly, they should go to jail for perjury for that. That's perjuring yourself in front of Congress. But they don't go to jail. They get raises and promotions for doing a piss poor job, for getting everyone killed. Most of the agents in Waco got raises and promotions. That bill, you can't, there's nobody within the sound of my voice who could screw up at their job ultimately and then lie to their boss about it and get a freaking raise. No, you get fired. Yeah. And any job other than being a federal agent where you get a promotion for it, my friends, it's ridiculous. It's, I've been talking about it for years. It makes me crazy that the wrong people were put on trial.
Well,
and wait,
I would almost say that, I know I would listen to your Keith Knight interview earlier, and you had mentioned that it drives you nuts that you continue for 25 years. You've been hitting this and hammering it and hammering it and hammering it, and it really doesn't seem like you're making any progress. But I would say if they feel it's necessary to continue to propagandize the American people on this subject, then you are making progress. You're winning. They wouldn't have to propagandize the American people if everybody believed them.
Yeah.
So
I'm ashamed of Vice for that. I love Vice. I think Vice is doing something for this generation that ABC, CBS, and NBC have never done. And they're going to places and they're getting the truth and they're getting a different perspective for a younger generation. And I really expected more of them. Now I understand it's a show called I Was There, and they got the perspective of Byron Sage. Of course, he's going to tell his story. But I'm just surprised. I don't know, man. I expected more.
Well, you have to remember a lot of these corporate media organizations are experiencing severe financial difficulty, and they need the government on their side. And I heard the other day that Vice is damn near ready to shut down. They're laying off a lot of people right now. So they need that government money, So what are they going to do? They're going to placate the people that are going to help them financially, help them keep their doors open.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I try to mention every time I give a talk, and if I stop now, right? We got to remember about the now listen, You got the extreme right and you got the extreme left politically in this country, and they're both wrong. If you're too extreme in any way, there's something you're not seeing. I'm telling you, there are things that you were wrong about, extreme right and extreme left, and you just refuse to face it because you hate the other side so much. And we got to stop thinking as one side against the other. We got to start thinking like Americans and say, look, there's probably truth in the center here. Maybe my thoughts are a little radical and I need to come to the center. I brought all this up because every single, and it can be everything from CNBC to Fox News and everything in between, all media organizations, all newspapers, all magazines, everything online, everything you watch on television, everything you watch on HBO, everything that you see and disseminate during the course of a day is controlled by 4 companies. All media is controlled by 4 companies. 4 companies, that's it. Yeah. So whoever the CEOs are and the boards of those 4 companies literally dissect and dictate how they're going to present things to you and how you're going to think. They give you both sides of the argument, my friends. If you think you're digging deep and going on both sides, they're still giving you both sides of the argument. So, that's it. That's it. I've just tried to tell my experience bit by bit to people. And there was a time that I was becoming maybe politically skewed one way or the other, especially early on. Because what's frustrating is when you have a story and no one wants to hear it. Mm. And you're wondering why no one wants to hear your story because you were there. And because you've been so demonized, literally no one wants you on their show. No one wants to talk to you. And then all of a sudden, a guy comes up and says, hey, our group would love for you to speak. We got a gun club in Ohio. Why don't you come on up and speak to our group? And of course, it's a Republican NRA loving group of constitutionalist individuals, Americans. Mm-hmm. And those are the only people that even wanted to hear what I had to say, was the right. Mm-hmm. And so, I was raised very kind of liberal in a liberal Democratic family. Okay. I didn't let that, I didn't care. I mean, I wasn't, how do I explain this? I wasn't really into politics. I was a musician. I just wanted to play drums. I wanted to have a good time. A long-haired hippie kid, just wanted to play in a band and tour the world. That's all I wanted to do was one rock and roll tour, and I'd have been at. I ended up playing in bands and playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights all over, Maine and LA and all over the place. So I had a good, run. I had a good time. I got to play for people. That's how I spent pretty much the last 20 years of my life, and I can't complain, But, there's just, I think what happened was I had to open my mind when the only people that wanted to hear what I had to say were people that I think instinctively I disagreed with. And I started to find many similarities. And I started to see these people really care about the Constitution. They care about Waco. They care about what happened there. And that was amazing to me. Mm. And I had to reread the Constitution and understand what that meant, what the Constitution meant, what the sacrifice of the forefathers meant. Right. But at the same time, I see hypocrisy on both sides. I think the right is always claiming to be, Christian. And then I'm wondering why there are so many homeless. And then there's no money when it comes to the political side of it for to help our vets or to help the homelessness problem or to help with healthcare and to help with mental care. This country needs a therapist. Everybody in this country could use a therapist. And part of the homelessness problem and the drug addiction problem comes from mental health. I personally believe. And you don't even have to be an extreme mental health case or individual. You could have had things happen to you when you were a child that is affecting you and you don't even understand why you behave the way you do or why you're seeking out for drugs as an escape from your pain. There's many reasons why people become addicted. And instead of helping them, we criminalize them and throw them in jail. So, I don't know what the solution is. People say communism or people say socialism. And I say, how about humanitarianism? How about just helping out your fellow countrymen? And that includes the veterans who have fought for you during the course of the last couple of wars. They come back all screwed up in the head from the shit they've had to do and the stuff they've had to see. And it's just like, hey, welcome home. That's it. I guess the contrast is that at least they're not being spit at like during the Vietnam era when our veterans came home and were spit at and called baby killers. And it's like, could you imagine serving your country and having to come home to that?
Right.
What's my point? My point is, I think there should be a happy medium. Maybe we build one less B-2 bomber, one less stealth bomber, and take that money and put it into some programs for at least mental health and healthcare for our citizens. We're the richest nation on the face of the earth. Why can't we make that happen? And yet we never seem to be able to do that politically.
Well,
So,
and I've heard it said that with the war on drugs, there's a mini Waco every day in this country. When you look at like SWAT raids and no-knock raids on people's homes, and then you listen to some of the rhetoric that's being spewed this year, and people, American citizens, being labeled as insurrectionists or domestic terrorists just because of their belief system. And so I think it's more important now that you get your message out and that you get your story out, because of the way that the division is going, it almost seems inevitable that there's going to be another, situation like a Waco. And I can't say when, I can't say how, I don't know where, but it just feels like it's building up to that. And you're going to have a portion of the country cheering for it from an ideological standpoint.
mm,
And that's terrifying to me, because this, I mean, if you go back to the reasoning, behind the initial siege, this all had to do with gun rights, and gun rights are still being attacked constantly, and you have states like Texas, you have states like Arizona coming up with legislation to make their states Second Amendment sanctuary states, and no longer following federal regulation. But that's not going to stop the feds from trying to come in and knock out, the 3%ers or the John Brown Gun Club or whoever else that, is interacting with the gun community.
no, it's not going to stop them at all. It's going to make it. It's going to make them double down. The same shit in Waco. It's the pride and the arrogance of the federal government.
Right.
And okay. I'm going to get into it. Screw it. You want to get into it? Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
We
saw this recently.
We've had enough foreplay. Let's get into it.
We're flirting with disaster now, baby.
I saw them live when I was in the military. Yeah.
That's just good sound, good band.
Yeah.
So January 6th, a bunch of people go to protest what they claim was the presidency being stolen. And, the only thing I want to say about that is I remember Gore, the Gore-Bush debacle,
mm-hmm.
and how if they're ever seen in the course of my life that there was a stolen election, it would have been back then.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's Bush winning, and the whole vote comes down to the state of Florida, where George Bush's brother Jeb is the governor of. So let's think about that for a minute. There's the hanging chads. What a coincidence. What an amazing coincidence that the deciding state is Florida, where the person running for president's brother is the governor. Okay. So to me, just as kind of just as a musician dude, I was like, okay, they're stealing the election. They're taking it from court. I said they stole the election. And I remember the stickers that the Republicans had of a baby with a baby crying with a pacifier, like right there, like getting ready to get put in his mouth. And they said the Democrats were little babies crying because, Bush got elected. So, okay, now yet Gore still conceded. He backed out. He did the proper thing, took it to court, to the legal system. Mm-hmm. Found that, there wasn't enough evidence to say, okay, you're not the president. So he did the right thing and said, Bush wins. I wish that the Republicans would have done the same thing here with Trump losing. You can say the election wasn't stolen, man. Listen, it's how it is. It's how this country runs. If it was stolen, I haven't seen the evidence, and I've been looking. 4 judges all claim that the election wasn't stolen. There's no evidence of that. So, what's the point? How far do you go? Well, you go to the point where a bunch of people show up in Washington, and what should have been a peaceful protest turns into what it turned into, and people marching against the Capitol, some Capitol Police dying. Now, imagine how much worse that would have been if Trump actually would have showed up and went shoulder to shoulder to them as Congress, as he claimed he was going to. Right. But he did go back to the White House, again, lying to his own people and not showing up to do what he said he was going to do. So how much worse would it have been? And what's my whole point? My whole point is we have a system in place, and we may not like it if the other guy wins. But you can't say all the time that everything is a lie and everything is a cover-up. There are many things are covered up, but not everything. Oh, I know what I wanted to say.
Okay.
So January 6th occurs, and we have a new president. It's Biden, of course. I saw the testimony of some of the people that were in Congress, how scared they were. You could see the pictures of them hiding, thinking they could have died. And some of them could have. I don't know what would have happened had they found Pence or found Pelosi. They may have hung Pelosi. I don't know. A mob is capable of anything. There's nothing worse than the spirit of like-minded people on a course of destruction. That's always been a fear of everyone through the course of history. Mobs are how terrible things.
Can I ask you? I got to ask you one question about this, though.
Can I just finish my point?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So here's the people in Congress are scared. They're terrified. They think they're going to die, and yet they live through it. The whole thing is suppressed. Everyone goes home after the course of time. Some people are killed. Yes, absolutely. What is surprising to me is the attitude the Democrats had after. Even though they were afraid for their lives that it could have ended up worse than it did, right? You would think that some people in the Democratic Party would see what happened and say, oh, maybe we need to talk better to these people. Maybe we need to figure out why these people are so angry they're showing up and trying to take over Congress. Maybe there needs to be more communication as opposed to this incredible divisiveness. And instead of trying to build a bridge, they're doubling down. So I think that the Democrats are, and by no means am I a political analyst of any kind, but it looks to me like they're just making the situation worse. What were you going to say?
I just got to be curious. I watch every time I watch Waco Rules of Engagement. Yeah, I hate Chuck Schumer more, and so imagining that he was one of the people cowered on the floor, afraid for his life, gives me kind of a giddy feeling. Like I mean, come on, just a little bit, right?
I'm no fan of Schumer at all. So yeah, that's my point. I make these points and people think that I've been called a traitor. I've been called all kinds of stuff now. And it's just like, listen, I kind of understand both sides. Right. And I a little sympathy for both sides. I do not. Yeah, you're right. I don't like Schumer. He was a piece of garbage.
Oh, Biden was horrible during the testimony too. Yeah.
I saw that too. I saw that as well. Believe me, I'm well aware of that.
Well, you
And
were there. Yeah, I mean,
I don't remember Biden from that though. I remember Schumer.
oh,
Biden, I don't. I remember recently watching the videos of Biden.
oh, okay.
But to me, it was other people. You know, it was people like, oh, there was Conyers who said he made something. He was originally surprised at the lack of constitutionality in Waco, and then he turned around. You know, all his little congressman buddies basically said, "You got to get on board with us," and then they were against Waco. There was the Jewish gentleman, I can't remember his name, Lantos, who was totally pro-government. And, you know, this is a guy that should understand what the Constitution means and what the freedoms and rights of people are. But they have a very strict way of viewing things, you know, and it's, like I said, it's not black and white, man. It's very, what happened to Waco is very, very complicated.
Mhm.
And I don't care what you want to say, they covered up the crimes of what the government did. And they did it. I have a saying that I like to repeat. That's a senator named Henry Clay in the 1800s said, "The devices of power and its minions are the same in all countries and in all ages. It marks its victim and denounces it, exciting the public hatred to conceal its own abuses and encroachments."
I gotta say, I watched a book signing you did earlier today from 1999, and I am impressed that even in 1999 you were reciting that. Yeah,
and it's one of those things you read and it's like it's tattooed on the inside of my head. It's just, that's what Waco was. He summed it up 100 years before, 200 years before, 100 and something years before, exactly what happened.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, perfect. It was perfect.
well, and it's happened so many times in the United States. I mean, you look at, you know,
It happens on playgrounds.
you have there was Black Wall Street in Tulsa. There was the bombing in Philadelphia when they bombed a damn subdivision. You know, I mean, there's all these times in American history that things like this have happened. And so to have a spokesman alive today saying, you know, Ruby Ridge was horrible, and you've quoted that several times in the past. But back to when y'all realized what was happening. So those after David got the call from the Hewitt gun shop, then the agents moved in across the street, right? Were y'all aware of almost immediately that these were agents, or did it take some time? When did y'all figure out what was going on there?
I personally right away knew that they were some kind of government agent, federal agents. Their story didn't make sense. It didn't look right. 4 guys moving in, of all the places across the street from us, where there's literally maybe 2 or 3 farmhouses on the entire street, Double A Ranch Road.
Right. Yeah. And for the listeners that haven't been there, this area is not in Waco. It's outside of Waco. It's secluded. It's off by itself. I mean, I live on 9 acres, but if you come off of my property, you're on a highway. This isn't even on a highway. Y'all are down a dirt road, basically, out in the middle of nowhere. And just have your own little space. You weren't hurting anybody. It was almost like a little commune.
It was.
Yeah.
You know, it was, when I first moved there, what was really funny about the property is there were 10 little houses in a row going down the road. And that was, you know, there was the main house where they had the cafeteria and the chapel. And then, you know, people lived in the little houses. And my first impression was, oh my God, that's the cultiest thing I've ever seen in my life. And so I remember when the suggestion was made to build one big house and tear down the little house, I was like, yeah, let's do that.
But when those helicopters started flying over, they were like, oh shit, they got barracks.
So yeah, it became.
But, okay, so the guys move in next door. I thought it was hilarious, the story you told about when y'all brought him pizza and the guy just reached out and was like, my girlfriend's here, and grabbed the pizza and like wouldn't let y'all see inside. You didn't even see his face. You just saw a hand pop out.
Yeah. Yeah, they did not want us there. They wanted, it's funny because they made, like I remember the first night after they moved in, it was so obvious. They went out and they set up a target and they shot at the target as if to say, we're here and we like guns. They were trying to plant seeds to make contact with us.
Right.
The whole thing was so, these guys move in, they have very nice vehicles. They're not moving in any furniture, but they're moving in cases that look like they hold electronic equipment. That's what they're. And then they're claiming, when we finally do meet them, they claim that they're ranchers going to TSTC, which is the technical trade college here in Waco.
I had a friend that graduated there.
Yeah. And they're claiming that they're studying philosophy.
At a trade college. That's where my buddy learned how to be a welder. With the philosophy of welding.
Yeah. Jeez. That's what the main guy said.
I'm the Nietzsche of welding.
It's just, scales grow taller on down the line.
Yeah.
It was obvious. But where Steve and Wayne were really kind of upset about it, they were like, we got to find out where these cars registered to, and David's like, it doesn't matter who they are. CIA, FBI, who cares? I have a truth to present, and I'm going to present it. That was his attitude.
Right.
If this guy is working with the government, maybe I can show him the 7 seals. He'll see that we're just studying the Bible, and we're a group of people, and see that there's no illegal activity, and we'll drop his case. That was David's way of looking at it. That was his philosophy.
Now, were all four of them interacting with y'all, or was it just Robert Rodriguez?
Pretty much just Robert Rodriguez, maybe another guy, but it always seemed like when he brought someone over, the other guy just didn't say anything. They weren't very good undercover guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found it interesting that David and Robert actually built some sort of bond together.
It did seem that way.
Was it in testimony? Oh no, it was an interview in the Washington Times. I think it was
Dallas Morning News. I read a really interesting article with Robert, the Dallas Morning News once.
Oh, is that what it was?
Probably. We're probably
where he was referencing that he was close to actually joining the yeah. So
I think the journalist said, was he reaching you? Was he getting to you? Were you close? And Robert said, yeah, I was close.
Yeah.
That was very interesting, very telling. The other thing that he said that was really interesting too, he said that he would go over to talk to David and get a study or two, and he would come back and his fellow agents would have to like shake him up and say, listen, you're not here to get converted. You're here to do a job.
Right.
And he'd start asking questions. Well, what about this? What about that? This guy says this about, they're like, dude, you're not here to get converted. You're here to do a job. So stop. But David definitely had him thinking. David definitely had planted a seed in there. And, I think Robert was convicted. I think he had a conviction that David really had something. And it's funny. You can even look back to Pontius Pilate, who wanted to basically wash his hands of the whole thing. He's like, when they're getting ready to crucify as Yeshua, Jesus, and he says, I find no fault in this man. We should release him. And they're like, no, crucify him. So, it's interesting. It's that conviction of knowing this guy is not guilty of anything and you want me to kill him. And that's my job. Now I have to kill him because you're all telling me I have to kill him. And I represent the people. That's, it's interesting. Interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, and y'all found out it was about 45 minutes before the initial attack began that y'all found out that something was going on. And Robert Rodriguez, I guess, had been there that day, and David had said something to him about, I know this is happening. And so
Really?
he tried to
Really?
call it off, didn't he?
He did. He was there talking to David in the morning, and they were talking about the first installment of the Sinful Messiah series, the Waco Tribune Herald. They've done a bang-up job, the Waco Tribune Herald. They play a big part in getting everyone killed. All their articles that they did, but they had this come out before the raid. And so David was, Robert wanted to get David's reaction to the article. That's why he went over that. But he had been over every morning. So I didn't think too much of it. And then what happened is someone came in, David Jones, Heather and Kevin Jones's dad came in. There were two kids that were living there. Came in while he was talking to Robert and said, listen, I got to talk to you, David. And they went to the other room, and he said, I was just stopped by some ATF guys some camera guys asking where Mount Carmel was. They said something's going down. So, Mr. Dave Jones knew that something was going to happen and told David, who then went back and talked to Robert and said, we know they're coming, Robert. Good luck. And Robert left and went back across the street. David said something like, you know us, you know who we are, you know the kind of people we are. You should tell your people to call this off. We know. So good luck. And Robert got in the car and his truck and drove away. He tried to get him to stop to not go forward with the raid to let him know that, that Crash knew they were coming. They went forward with it anyway. Seriously, just mistake after mistake, just arrogant, bad decision after arrogant, bad decision that just got so many people killed. So freaking needless.
Well, yeah. And that was one of the points that Byron Sage was sticking by in his interview, was that y'all had planned for this and y'all were ready for this, and y'all had, snipers in 40 positions. And, I was like, no, dude, there wasn't 40 positions. Like you can look at the front of the house and look at it and go, yeah, they didn't have 40 positions set up. Like that just wasn't, that's not what happened. And
all the tests.
Go ahead.
You weren't done. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I just found it funny that they so blatantly continue with this lie that y'all were ambushing them when it was very easy. And there were, I've always heard people point out the cattle trucks right there with just the tarp over the top. Excuse me. The cattle trucks that just had the tarp over the top, and how easy it would have been to take out the ATF before they even got off the cattle trucks. Well, yeah, but then there was also the point of view that they ran out of ammunition later that day and said, okay, we'll leave, cease fire, and y'all stop firing at them. When y'all could have easily just said, whatever, I don't care if you're out of ammunition or not.
We got plenty.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The point is, again, the whole thing's totally avoidable. Mistake after mistake after mistake. Cover up, they lie about it, and they get raises and promotions. It just absolutely blows my mind. They shot indiscriminately at women and children for 45 minutes. And, it's true. If it wasn't an ambush, we all know that. At the trials, it was indicated by several of the ATF guys on the ground that the first shots they believed were from the dogs being shot. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? You got a team going shooting people's dogs right away. What the hell you think's going to happen? Ask any dog owner if there's someone comes in and shoots your dog, what are you going to do about it? You're not going to sit there and fucking take it. That's
why you keep seeing me jack around over here on the side. That's my pit bull that rides with me in my truck wanting attention because I'm talking. So he thinks that he deserves the attention. Don't come around here and try to shoot my dog.
It's crazy. And then, it just goes on and on and on, all 45 minutes, just indiscriminately. And they were ambushed? Really? They were ambushed. Not one, the death toll would have been horrific if that were the case.
Right.
Never. Never was the case. Nobody wanted to shoot anybody. We didn't want them to come in and shoot at us. They shot at us first, and they continued to shoot at us. Some people defended their positions. That's it. That's what you do. I mean, it's fucking American policy, man. You don't come in and shoot at someone in their house and not expect them to defend themselves. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And then listen, the helicopters were coming in the back. Everyone who saw the helicopters, especially Kevin Wycliffe, and the helicopters were shooting. So, there are people that still deny the helicopters were shooting because the government has always said they have. The government's lying to you. I don't, if you're going by the Danforth report and you think the helicopters didn't shoot, you are deceived.
Well, listen to the phone call with the negotiator. What was his name? Jim. And David calls him a fucking liar, right?
Yeah.
He's like, you're a damn liar, because we know that they had guns, and we know they were. Well, actually, what I was saying is they didn't have mounted guns. There were no mounted guns shooting at you. Like he quickly changes a story when he gets called out for lying. I mean, it was blatantly obvious that they were trying to polish over all the things that they were doing.
Yes, they are liars. They are liars.
And they're trying to make y'all accountable for it. So we're running up on an hour, and I told you I wouldn't keep you any longer than an hour. Run us through the April 19th. Run us through, from your point of view, your position, what happened.
Do you have any specific questions about April 19th?
Not really. I kind of always wanted just to hear your story, like what it actually you experienced.
Early in the morning, the loudspeakers came on and they said that they were going to start putting in gas. They were going to start tear gassing us, and that the siege was over. We're all under arrest, come out with our hands up. And then, the popping started. Steve Schneider, that's something I want to address. Steve Schneider went up and down the hall saying, "Everyone go get your gas masks, get your masks." And something that Byron said in in his interview, was that after Steve said, "Get your mask," he said, "Start pouring fuel, pour some fuel." That was never said. I was there. I remember. I was in the hall next to Steve. I remember him running up and down going, "Everyone get your masks." At no time ever did I hear him say, "Pour fuel, put fuel, light a fire." None of that shit was ever said to me or anywhere near me or in my presence. It did not say it. And Byron Sage made it sound like right after Steve Schneider said, "Get your gas mask," then he said, "Pour fuel." That's a crock. Mm-hmm. That did not happen. Now, the other thing that really makes me crazy about this, and all that takes a little bit of conductive reasoning. The FBI all say that at 6 a.m. they have audio tapes of people pouring fuel, of Koresh telling people to pour fuel, or Steve telling people to pour fuel at 6 a.m. The fire starts at 12 noon. The FBI claimed that Koresh gave the order to start a fire at 6 a.m. What's the problem with this? Fire doesn't start until 6 hours later. So if Koresh gave the commandments, or whatever you want to call it, to start a fire at 6 a.m., then how come no one started a fire at 6 a.m.? It took 6 hours for that magical fire to start.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense, man. Doesn't make any sense. And the only tape that I've ever heard that was somewhat clear was a tape of people saying what sounded like to me is "cut the power." Now, they played this for me at the grand jury. They had me read off a piece of paper, and the paper said, "Light the fire." And 3 times I listened to it without reading the paper, and I heard "cut the power," and then I opened my eyes to read what they wanted me to believe was being said there. And they said, it said on the paper, it said "light the fire." I said, that is not what he's saying. They're saying "cut the power." And so, the grand jury was like, they couldn't believe that I couldn't hear it. But to me, it was very plain.
Right.
So I think if you play an audio and then you show them the dialogue you want to see, that many people, because they're seeing the dialogue, will think that's what's being said. But that's not the truth in that case. Mm-hmm. Now, the FBI claims there's some other magic audio that I've never heard before where they're clearly saying, "Pour fuel, start a fire." Never heard it. Right. Never seen it. I don't believe it.
Yeah.
It's not what I experienced. It's not what anyone said. at around 10:30, they were gassing us through the entire morning, and then when they ran out of ferret rounds, the tank started to come through the building, and of course you could hear the building scraping. I was on the first floor. I went to the hallway and I looked down the hallway to the hallway that led to the cafeteria area, and it was destroyed. I mean, the tanks had already come through, made huge holes. The floorboards were all over the place. You couldn't get down that hallway. There's too much debris. And then it was blocked off.
Right.
And so, I knew there was just no way to have any access to the rest of the building. It was cut off after the tank started.
Yeah. You can watch the video. If you watch Waco Rules of Engagement, they show a lot of the video of the tanks pushing in the walls. And you had made a comment about how terrifying it was to be standing at your front door and then it just comes flying in at you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, really interesting that, you were right there having to jump out of the way as the tank's coming through your front door and pushing your front door through your living room.
Yeah. It's something you never forget, man. That's for sure. When you got to duck back away from a tank coming through your front door. That's just crazy. I wish there was a way my brain could have recorded that so we could have put that video to VHS so people could actually see physically what that was like.
Right.
Because it was absolutely terrifying. You thought you were dead.
And is that when you lost contact with the children? Like you could no longer get to the children from that point?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was around 10 a.m., 10:30.
And at what point did you go to the catwalk and try to get across the catwalk?
Very end. Right around, I guess, 12:04 or 5, someone yelled from the upstairs, "There's a fire up here." Mm-hmm. And so I knew that I couldn't get to there through the first floor. So I tried to get up to the second floor. And I, of course, wanted to see if Serenity had been put into the underground bus. And so I figured, I went over the catwalk to where the second store hallway was. Mm-hmm. And there was a blanket that was over the doorway. And so I went to open the blanket and a big gust of smoke came in at me. And I remember I had to move back to avoid being hit in the face of the smoke. And then as the smoke dissipated, I went to go back into the hallway and this wall of flame shot down in front of me. It went down it was incredibly loud. It made this whoosh. Very loud. I could just see the flame go, in front of my face. And I just knew, there was no way I could get in that hallway. It was already consumed with flame.
Right.
So that was it. I went back downstairs to behind the chapel area. There's a little kind of catwalk back, a little walkway back there. And that's where, Wayne Martin was, Wayne Martin Jr., Clive Doyle, Derek Lovelock, Jamie Casillo. I think Mr. Friesen was there. A bunch of different people. And, the four people that came out of that wall was Jamie Casillo, myself, Derek Lovelock, and Clive Doyle. Clive came out last. We didn't think anyone would be able to make it out after me because I left when I heard my hair crackle, the side of my head. And, I was leaning against the wall and the wall was catching fire. And I just knew I was a goner. I turned around and looked at Wayne Martin, who had taken his gas mask off, and he had his back against the wall and he slid down the wall as smoke enveloped him. I couldn't see him anymore. And so I went out. I went to the hole, and it's like Jamie went out, Derek went out, and I'm like, well, better to be shot than to burn to death is my attitude. So I went out through that hole. I remember it was muddy for some reason, which I don't know if that was the fuel that they had poured out a few days before in front of that area or not. But it was muddy there, and my shoes got caught, and I had to pull them out. And then I saw the Red Cross sign, and the big speakers were saying to walk to the Red Cross sign. So I started to walk that way. I could see, Jamie in front of me. And started walking up that way. I turned around in time to see Clive Doyle come out. And he was patting his arms out. His arms were smoking.
Right.
I didn't think anyone was going to make it out past me, so I was happy to see Clive. But I knew that he was probably hurting. It looked like, he was on fire. And so I continued. That's where everything went into like the tunnel vision, the shock took over everything. I was just like, I could literally just see like the blindfolders on directly in front of me. Saw the Red Cross sign, went about halfway out, about 50 yards, turned around in time to see that giant explosion. And the giant explosion was so powerful, I could feel the heat of the fireball from about 50 yards out, about halfway between the Red Cross sign and the building.
Right.
That's how powerful that was. I could feel the blast of the heat from it. And so we got to where the Red Cross sign was, and there was two big burly FBI guys. One and a dark-haired guy. One had a gun, a rifle. The other had a notepad. They put us on our face, lined us up, put plastic handcuffs around our hands at the back. And basically, they just started just saying, okay, where are the kids? You got to live with this for the rest of your life. Where are the children? I said, the children should be on the underground bus. You guys know all about it. I would go to the bus. And the FBI looked at the other FBI guy, and the other guy said, oh, we tear gassed that bus. And I just looked at him like, you tear gassed that bus. Okay, well, that's their avenue of escape, and he tear gassed. And it was crazy. I was like, the one FBI guy looked at the other, he said, I knew this wasn't going to work. I knew we should have gone to plan A or plan B. He said one of those. We should have gone with the other plan, is what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, do you think they started the fire? And the one guy said to the other guy, and the guy said, you're damn right they started their fire. There wasn't one effing pyrotechnic in that building. See, that always said, I always thought about that. Him saying that, the way he said it, he believed that there were no pyrotechnics used. And that's part of the problem, I think. And when I think of Byron Sage, it makes me wonder, is Byron Sage an upright liar? Because I believe he lied to Janet Reno when he said we're at an impasse and they're not coming out. We had just made a plan with them for David Koresh to write the 7-seal manuscript, and then everyone was coming out. Mm-hmm. So they weren't at an impasse. There was a plan. We had a plan in place. It wasn't an impasse, but yet he didn't tell that to Reno, and I wonder why. But the fact that that agent on the ground could believe that there were no pyrotechnic devices indicate to me that the people on the ground had no fucking idea what was happening. Many of them didn't.
Yeah.
But I think it was somebody in a much higher position used pyrotechnics in that building. They were found in the evidence locker. They were mislabeled as silencers. There were 6 or 7 pyrotechnic devices that were found in the rubble. So the FBI used pyrotechnic devices. They lied about it for 3 years. It finally came out that the pyrotechnic devices were in the building, were found in the building, and so that's the FBI. They used pyrotechnic devices in the building. They can say whatever they want. They can say we started the fire. They can say it started 3 places at the same time. They can say whatever they want, but they used pyrotechnics in that building. And I want everyone to think about this because they fucking lied about it for 3 years.
Well,
they lied to everyone about it for 3 years, and they only admitted it when they got caught.
It wasn't only that they did use pyrotechnics, and it's very obvious, and it did come out in evidence. But not only that, y'all were accused of having grenades. So either they weren't sharing information properly on the warrant, or everybody knew the warrant was bunk and didn't bother even sharing the information that was in the warrant. You know what I'm saying? So either way, these field agents that are sitting there on the ground didn't even know that there was a possibility of explosions. They had no idea what was going on, even as far as their own warrant was concerned.
Yeah, I got you.
So, well, hey, anybody that hasn't heard your entire story, you wrote a great book called Waco, a survivor story that they should go pick up. Everybody should go get that book. Anything else you got to plug?
Well, not really plug. I mean, the memorial, April 19th, the 28th year memorial is coming up. We're doing it online, Zoom. Mm-hmm. And basically, the only way to get in on it is you have to email us your email address, and then we'll forward a link. We're not doing an open link because of the Zoom bombing and stuff like that. You know,
Right.
we don't want undesirables.
Well, I know Beatrix will be sitting in on it again this year. She sat in on it last year.
Well, if you're interested, you can friend me on Facebook and ask for a link.
Yeah, either that or they can email me and I'll get them a link. But so
yeah,
we'll make sure anybody who wants to be involved in that can be involved in that.
Great, thanks. Also, there's my website, wacosurvivors.com. You could send an email to me personally through that. It's david@wacosurvivors.com. But there's a lot of great information on Waco survivors. I got most of the 911 tapes. I got all of the transcripts of the negotiations for the 51 days. I have audio of some of the negotiations, most of the negotiations. There's audio of David Koresh giving sermons in the 80s and some of David Koresh's music. Stuart Wright's writings, who really does an amazing critical analysis of what the government and the FBI did at Mount Carmel. Stuart Wright's a professor at Beaumont, Texas. Brilliant guy. I love
right
Stuart.
down the road from me.
Yeah, nice. He's done. Yeah, that's right. It is. We talked about that. I talked about that when I talked to Beatrix. We talked about he did some great work there, man. All that stuff's on my website. I got a ton of great free stuff on the website.
But that's wacosurvivors.com. I'll make sure I'll link to that.
Any books that are bought off the website are signed by me personally.
Awesome.
So,
that's
man.
Awesome, man. No, thank you, man. And I'm glad we got to just chat a little bit as well. I mean, I know you get on these calls and it's all like, okay, tell me every little detail. And it's like, let's just relax and have a conversation, So
6-part series.
There is a 6-part series. Is it still on Netflix?
No, it's off Netflix.
Is it off of Netflix? Where can is that for sale at wacosurvivors.com?
No, it isn't. The documentaries are there. I guess I can let your audience sit on this. They're doing a second season, and the second season is going to be about Vernon becoming David, and then some of the stuff that happened during the trials and how just crazy all that was, and the amount of evidence that was not shown to the jury. There's so much there. But yeah, Paramount Networks is working on the second season of Waco, which is
nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I enjoyed the first one. It was funny sitting there with Beatrix watching it because she's like, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That's not how that happened.
If you're literate, you've read the book, you'll notice quite a few differences.
She was like, she was like, they are messing up my friend's story.
I can't be too mad at them. They humanize the people.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you want to know what really happened, read the book.
Yep. There you go.
Find yourself some discipline. Sit down a half hour a night and knock it out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. It's a good book too. It's well written.
I try to get people to read. I am one who likes to learn from watching the Science Channel and things like that. But I have a short attention span, so I have to really discipline myself to read. But I try to read something every day.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, as somebody who loves to write and loves to read, it's well written. It is easy to read. I sat down with it one night, and actually it was one morning before I came to work, and I was like, well, let's see what we're looking at here. Let's see how this was written. And I read the first 3 chapters in probably 45 minutes. I mean, I just flew through it. So yeah. Nice. So well written. It's very easy to read, and it keeps you intrigued.
See, spot, run fast.
As long as it's not Dr. Seuss.
Hey, I love Dr. Seuss.
All right, Bubba, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you waved just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. And they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Of those who are to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.